Right now, governments across Europe and Asia are scrambling to hold emergency meetings over the Strait of Hormuz. It is a narrow strip of water that provides the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. And every single day, roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply passes through it. The consensus among policymakers is clear. If something goes wrong here and the strait gets blocked, the global economy faces a severe shock. And if you look back 2 decades, you can see why they think that. This chart shows the United States' historical dependency on foreign oil. You'll notice a massive peak 20 years ago, when the country relied on imports for roughly 60% of its total petroleum consumption. Back then, any disruption in the Middle East caused an immediate linear reaction. Global supply dropped, domestic prices at the pump spiked, inflation surged, and the entire US economy hit pause. So today, as tensions rise in the region, global markets are panicking, assuming that exact same chain of events will play out again. But that assumption relies on a geopolitical map that no longer exists. A disruption in the strait today doesn't hit the world equally. Over the past 20 years, new drilling techniques unlocked massive shale reserves across the United States. The domestic industry boomed. The country rapidly replaced the oil it used to buy from abroad with oil it pulled out of its own ground. Look at this graph tracking global superpower oil production. Over the last decade, the United States steadily climbs past its competitors, eventually claiming the #1 spot as the single largest oil producer in the world. Because of this domestic capacity, the United States moved away from the vulnerable side of the global energy trade. The historical narrative of universal panic is dead. If the Strait of Hormuz shuts down tomorrow, the real question is who is actually relying on that specific route? This map tracks the actual flow of oil out of the Strait of Hormuz today. You'll see this minuscule line heading to the United States, representing barely 2.5% of the total volume. Meanwhile, these massive, thick arrows point entirely toward Asia, with 75% of the oil landing in China, India, Japan, and South Korea. This split-screen comparison shows an asymmetric shock, a US price problem versus an Asian supply problem. Zooming into the US, a global supply squeeze makes oil more expensive. It hurts at the pump, but physical oil still flows domestically. It's a manageable hurdle. In Asia, it is a very different reality. Higher prices are a challenge, but losing the physical energy to power massive metropolitan hubs is paralyzing. When a country loses access to its actual energy supply, the infrastructure starts to break. Factories are forced to slow down. Power grids implement strict rationing, and the baseline production required to keep an economy moving simply stalls out. It is the exact same geopolitical event, but the consequences depend entirely on where a country is positioned on the supply chain. And oil is only half the story. There is a secondary market entirely reliant on this same maritime choke point: liquefied natural gas, or LNG. Roughly 20% of the world's LNG supply passes through the strait. Nations like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates rely on it to send over 90% of their total gas exports to the rest of the world. Over the past decade, the United States has quietly built up its infrastructure to become the largest exporter of LNG on the planet. This means the same asymmetric dynamic we see in oil repeats itself in natural gas. When one region is abruptly cut off from its critical energy supply, another independent region steps in to sell them the difference. When global supply tightens, the resulting spike in prices generates massive revenue for the companies capable of producing and exporting the alternative supply. We can see the markets reacting to this right now. This financial chart illustrates the recent performance of major US exporters. Venture Global, one of the fastest-growing LNG companies, shows a sudden stock jump of nearly 40% in a single month, while Cheniere Energy is up nearly 15%. Scarcity forces a transfer of wealth. Capital flows directly away from dependent, vulnerable economies and into the domestic refineries and energy producers that control the alternative supply. Bottlenecks in the global economy create winners and losers. For the nations producing the energy, another hemisphere's crisis becomes a highly lucrative opportunity.
When traffic is stalled in the Strait of Hormuz, it usually signals a regional crisis. But this specific disruption is doing something different. This friction is quietly providing the United States with leverage in global trade negotiations. While Washington gains a diplomatic tool, the biggest loser in this scenario is China. A maritime conflict over an energy route has become the opening move in a larger geopolitical struggle between the world's two largest economies. Technology currently presents a similar navigation problem. With too many models and no clear answer on which one you're actually supposed to be using, the process is often a series of guesses. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Abacus AI. They built a way around this fragmentation by providing access to all the top AI models in one place, including ChatGPT 5.4, Gemini 3.1 Pro, and Claude Opus 4.6. Their Route LLM feature removes the guesswork. It automatically chooses the best model depending on your specific prompt, ensuring you use the right tool for text, images, or even full applications. Consolidating these tools into a single hub saves time, and at only $10 a month, it is significantly cheaper than paying for them separately. You can check out Abacus using the link in the description. Now, back to the oil. Returning to the trade war, Beijing saw the supply chain risk coming years ago and spent that time preparing for it. They aggressively diversified their suppliers, expanding imports from Russia and Brazil, and building physical infrastructure ties to South American oil in Venezuela. Domestically, they have been stockpiling massive strategic reserves in clusters of storage tanks across the country to buy themselves a window of time. But these safeguards only delay the risk, they don't eliminate it. Because China remains the largest importer of oil in the world, they are still exposed. The problem is the sheer scale of the Chinese economy. It requires 15 to 16 million barrels of oil every single day. This chart shows daily consumption against what they can produce, leaving a massive deficit, roughly 11 million imported barrels. A huge portion originates from one region, the Middle East. This massive flow is forced entirely through a single geographic bottleneck, the Strait of Hormuz. Because the raw mass of their survival is tied to this one narrow channel, their stockpiles can only provide a temporary cushion. They cannot solve the underlying dependency. In the short term, China can absorb the shock of a disruption. In the medium term, they begin drawing down those strategic reserves to keep the lights on. But if the blockage lasts, it shifts from a logistical inconvenience to a structural problem. This is because China doesn't just use energy, it runs on it. From manufacturing to industrial output, their economic engine depends on a constant flow. When that flow is disrupted, the pressure builds on the very foundation of their exports. Looking at the timing of this escalation, the situation in the Strait looks less like an isolated conflict and more like a tool of foreign policy. These energy tensions reached a critical point exactly as trade negotiations between the United States and China were unraveling. For years, the two countries have been locked in disputes over tariffs, technology restrictions, and supply chain decoupling. In any negotiation, leverage comes from pressure. Because China's economy faces structural risks from an energy cutoff that the US can better tolerate, the Strait of Hormuz has become a choke point for power.